always look back and think, okay, so if I never make a difference in other people's lives, I know that what I've had to learn, the skills that I've had to gain have transformed me. I know that before all
Mm.
this, when my husband had a stroke and we were going through COVID, I was in my lowest point, and me starting a business saved me. Every single time I feel like I learned something from my business, it helps me be a better mom. It's helping me to, see things differently because I was forced to go beyond my comfort zone.
Welcome to the podcast where motherhood meets reinvention. I'm your host, Sharon Macey, and this is Mom to More. I'll be speaking with remarkable moms who have embraced the art of transformation, crafting their more by leveraging the skills they hone as stay-at-home moms. They'll share their experiences, struggles, and successes as they return to a former career, pursued a passion or hobby, or charted an entirely new path, giving you the clarity, motivation, and inspiration to help you answer the question, what do you want to do when your kids grow up? Welcome back to a new episode of Mom to More. So my guest today went from Capitol Hill to the kitchen and swapped politics for Pilates and is now helping women heal from the inside out. Ali Essig is a holistic plant-based nutritionist, Pilates instructor, and the powerhouse mom behind PlantWhys, where she empowers women to take charge of their health through a plant-predominant diet and core-focused movement. Before stepping into the wellness world, Alicia worked on Capitol Hill as a communications director and legislative aide, so she knows how to advocate for change, whether in policy or in personal health. Alicia is also a stay-at-home mom of 6. Yes, 6. I bow down to you. Um, including twin baby boys. Her wellness journey began when her husband had a stroke at just 37 with no clear answers from doctors. That experience, combined with the earlier loss of her father to a heart attack at only 55, sparked a deep dive into the research and a total lifestyle shift. Now, she blends nearly 2 decades of Pilates experience with plant-based coaching to help other women and their families live healthier, more vibrant lives. Well, welcome, Ali. I am so thrilled you're joining me today.
Oh, thank you. It's so great to be here.
Thank you. Okay, so I realize that this episode is going to resonate with all moms, and it doesn't matter how old you are, how many kids you have, nothing like that, because healthy, vibrant living is something we all strive for. And for us older, postmenopausal mamas, it is especially relevant. But first, I like to start all of my podcast episodes with what I call my essential mom question. We know you have 6 kids. Amazing. Where are you raising them?
I live in the Washington, D.C. area. So it's so fun. There's always a lot going on out here.
It's terrific. Actually, one of our daughters lives there and she loves it. Absolutely loves it. Yeah. Okay. So why was it important for you to lean into family life and be there with your kids?
Yeah, I think, I worked on Capitol Hill and I absolutely loved my job so much. And then I had my first baby, and it's amazing where your passion just changes. I really wanted to spend more time with her, and I went back to work. I still was working my Capitol Hill job. And then luckily I got an offer to work on a campaign instead from home. And I wanted to be my nanny. I would look at her and all the things that she was doing. I'm like, I'm actually jealous of you that you get to just hang out with my sweet little girl. But I knew I needed a mix of both. Sometimes I feel like it's that all or nothing. It had to be complete full-time, full nanny, or nothing. And I was grateful that now I feel like a lot of women have these opportunities. But for me, it was kind of rare to be able to still work more part-time from home,
And I lived that as well. There's women of a certain age that we were either working in the home or we were working outside of the home, and the two did not meet up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I back then too, I couldn't even work on Capitol Hill part-time at home. Like there was no option. It was work a full-time schedule or nothing. And so I had to give up a job that I loved, but I still was able to work on campaigns and do something similar that was more flexible. But I'll never forget when I sent out that email to everyone, on my list, like, hey, I got a new job. I got a promotion. It's, working from home with my kids. And there was a woman who sent me an email that said, I worked full time until my second child. And when I quit, we were outside having a picnic. And my older daughter was telling me, "Hey mom, look at this ladybug, like look at it." And she sat down and looked at the ladybug, what the ladybug was doing, and realized I never ever have had time to notice what a ladybug is doing. To just like be at just at one with nature for just 5 seconds to actually notice and have that time. So anyway, I'll never forget that email. And she was just all about, she's like, I'm all about you doing this, taking this time. And then, maybe you'll come back, maybe you won't, but it is really important to take the time.
And it's so nice to hear. And it takes a kid to notice little things like ladybugs.
Right. Right. It's so true.
Right. Unless they're swarming in your house, but that's a whole other thing. All right. So you have had such a powerful personal journey. Can you take us back to the moment that sparked the shift toward plant-based living for your family?
Right. I think, after having multiple children and I worked part-time for a while, and then I ended up having to give up my part-time job. After 3 kids, I was like, okay, it's enough just for me to teach Pilates. And so I just taught Pilates on the side and was home mostly with the kids. But then something happens. And when you have something happen to your family, like when my husband had his stroke, there was the mama bear came out of me. I'm like, there has to be something that I can do that's within my power. And when he had his stroke, his vision was affected. And so we would be just praying constantly, what can we do? How can we get his vision back? Because he couldn't drive, he couldn't work. We had all of our 6 children, and I'm trying to handle that and try to help support my husband at that time.
That's overload.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
And I just had to focus on what I could control in the moment. And what I could control was what we were eating, and diving deep into that, realizing that there's one way of health, which I always thought would cover everything, was, if you lose weight, that you'll naturally be able to improve everything. And that is true. But we had been losing weight. I just had my twin babies. We had both gained the twin baby weight. We were eating more of the typical like high protein diet. And it was at this time that he had his stroke. And so I realized, okay, maybe there's more to health than just weight loss. And maybe that involves eating as many plant foods that we can, eating more fiber. Most of us are deficient on fiber, eating more nutrients. And as I saw the benefit that came to his health, his cholesterol numbers improve, his blood pressure go down, his, all of these other things, and his vision come back, most importantly, I just became so passionate that I'm like, everyone needs to know this, like from politics to Pilates to plants. So, it's like when I get passionate about something, I just love to share it. And so that's where, the desire to kind of go back to work, to start something, just came out of passion, really, because I love this so much.
Right. And people say you make your pain your purpose and your passion.
Yeah.
And you did that. So think back to those early days. What was it like transitioning a family of 8 to more of a plant-based or plant-predominant lifestyle? I remember having a child who was anaphylactic to tree nuts, and then found out that one of my other kids had some serious allergies, and looking at a list of things that they could no longer eat. And I remember starting to cry because I thought, how am I going to figure this out with all of these limitations? So tell me how you did it, because I know it can be a challenge.
Yeah. And I think it's drawing upon your strengths. One of my strengths is that I'm not an all or nothing person, and that it wasn't an allergy. This was just me wanting to be a little healthier. So it was like, okay, I don't have to be 100%. I don't have to give up, getting pizza on Friday nights. I don't have to give up everything. And so that was really helpful. And so I just started experimenting with recipes. Where it called for chicken, I would use chickpeas. When, it was a lot of ground beef, I would just add in more beans. I'd see where can I add in. And I never told the kids, hey, we are not going to eat this anymore. You're never going to have a hot dog for the rest of your life. Like I never was like that. So it didn't have to be an event. It was just me experimenting with new recipes. And so they didn't feel like it was something that mom's forcing us to do. And in fact, even if they have a special event, they can still, one of my daughters is like, all I want on my birthday is for you to get an egg McMuffin for breakfast. I'm like, that's fine. You can do that, and we can still,
I can do
yeah.
But you know what I like about your approach, Ali, is it is pragmatic and measured. And like you said, it's not all or nothing. I mean, I know people who are wholly plant-based to a fault.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you are getting enough protein, but you are getting enough fiber, and you are getting enough of the vegetables. So more of that Mediterranean type diet, right?
Right, exactly. And I think it's different for everyone. For me, I can control what I control and what I buy from the grocery store. And I buy pretty much 90% of everything I buy is plant-based. I do still buy some Greek yogurt, non-fat Greek yogurt, and occasionally I'll buy eggs. And sometimes
Mhm.
cheese sticks for my kids, but overall it's mostly plant-based. And then when we're social, like if there's an event with church, I let my kids eat whatever they want. If it's, and sometimes I'll have it too. If I'm eating dinner with family. When we go back home to visit family, it's like there's all these delicious foods that I grew up on and I still want to partake. But for the most part, what I'm cooking in my house isn't what I used to cook. I used to make cheese quesadillas every day for lunch. And now I'm like, okay, what can I make when I open the fridge? It's like, what can I make for lunch? That takes just as long as cheese quesadillas used to take, but maybe isn't, based in cheese. Like what's something else that
Right.
I can make that has more fiber and more nutrients, and including that protein too. So yeah, it requires a little extra mental effort, but it doesn't have to require extra time.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I remember when our kids were younger making tacos, and I would use turkey meat and I would put in a block of tofu and I would grind up zucchini, and that was their tacos. But years later, the kids all said to me, "Mom, we knew what you were doing." I'm like, "But you ate it, so that's okay."
Exactly. Exactly. Of course, I'm not hiding. I put beans in everything. It's like my son just had his birthday and he knows that there's going to be chickpeas in that cake instead of eggs and oil, and it's fine. It tastes great. I'm not hiding
Yeah.
anything from them. They know that that's what they're going to get, but it still can taste really great.
100%. Ali, we are going to take a quick break. And when we return, we are going to dive into PlantWhys and your mom skills. Be right back. And now a quick word from my sponsor, Ali Shoes. I gotta tell you, these are some of the most comfortable shoes I have ever worn. They're designed by women for women, like finally, right? And engineered with perfectly placed padding, so I can literally wear these all day. And I cannot say that for other brands I've worn. And I'm not the only one giving positive reviews. InStyle, Business Insider, and CNN are all saying the same thing. Oh, and they have a really cool origin story as well. So flats, heels, boots, you name it, they have it. Ally is letting me share the love with all of you. Head on over to Ally, that's ALLY.NYC, where new customers and listeners of the pod will get $40 off your first pair of heels. All their heels, like Classic, Kitten, Bold Block, Sexy Slingbacks, with special code MOMTOMORE40, and 10% off your first pair of boots and flats, so 10% off of each, with special code MOMTOMORE10. Ally is reimagining how comfort and function support women every day, and I love that. Thanks to Ally for sponsoring this episode. So, Ally, I'm going to quote you, and you said, "Feeling good should be the norm, not the exception." And I love that. So, talk to our listeners about what sets PlantWhys apart from other plant predominant programs or coaching services out there to help women achieve that good feeling as the norm.
I think sometimes we forget the wisdom that our body holds, that not one diet is perfect for everyone, and to really dive in to not only how your body feels but also test it a little bit. I think sometimes we think, okay, well, when I eat beans, I get gas, so therefore beans are bad. Like, no, you want to still dive into how does your body feel, but also maybe train your body to be able to consume foods that are healthy, but you just need a little bit more time. It's just like going to the gym. And if you were to go to the gym and you were to lift weights, you're going to be sore. You're not going to feel good the first time. But does that mean that it's bad for you? Not at all. In fact,
Not
one
at
of the
all.
best things you can do, right? But you do also need to
Yeah.
do it in a way that's paced progress over perfection, that you're slowly lifting a little bit heavier, instead of just going all in, changing the whole spectrum of your life. And that's what
Right.
happens sometimes when we join programs, that we have all this excitement at the beginning and we just want to change it all right away. And sometimes it's not the best way. Then maybe let's just add in a little bit more foods before we take things away, pace progress, making little baby steps so that it's actually a lifestyle change and not just a temporary diet.
Absolutely. And that's just smart. I mean, you don't go to the gym and all of a sudden pick up a 25 pounder and start doing it. You've got to get used to it. You've got to build up to it. And yes, you're right. It's the same thing with food. And I will admit, I definitely eat a plant predominant diet and I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It
So,
feels so good. And I think that's it. I was eating a cinnamon roll the other day made out of it's a sweet potato. It's like sweet potatoes and dates is like the sweetener. And I ate it and I'm like, that feels so good in my body. And I think just
mhm,
taking the time to recognize, yeah, it was sweet. Was it as good as a real cinnamon roll? No. But did it feel
but a whole lot better for you.
yeah, and it felt 10
Yeah.
times better in my body afterwards. I'm like, that was amazing. I want to have more of that because of how I felt afterwards.
Right. That makes so much sense. Okay, Ali, you have raised 6 kids. So clearly you have so many mom skills and superpowers that are now an essential part really of who you are. So let's talk like the top 3 or so skills that you fine-tuned while you were raising your family and how they segued into your entrepreneurial side.
I think it's funny that sometimes we feel like we need to do everything for our kids, but one of the gifts of having multiple kids is that I don't have time to be on top of everything. Like my kids need to tell me when they need me to give them a ride. It's like, "Hey mom, you need to pick me up at this time." And this is making them so much more responsible and it takes a huge load off of my shoulders. I don't have to feel like I need to know every time that they have an event at school that I need to be there for, or they
Mhm.
know that if I don't show up, it's because they didn't tell me. And I
I love that. But you're making them more responsible. I love that.
exactly, exactly. And if they, the more that they can take charge, I think it helps them to become their own leaders too.
Right. Okay. And a couple other mom skills that you have honed while you were with the kids and you're now using every day.
I think one of the biggest mom skills, and it goes back to cooking that I have that I love, is just the creativity process of making food. It can be so fun, and I
Mhm.
find a lot of joy in it. Even if it's just okay, my kids, I made this meal, they didn't like it, right? So there's leftovers. So say it's like a pasta dish, and so it's like I love to open the fridge and think, okay, what are we gonna have for dinner? And how can I
Mhm.
make these leftovers taste so good that they'll eat it tonight? And so
Hmm.
sometimes I'll make like a very healthy plant-based dish and they didn't eat it. But if I add in some like beyond meat to it or, something like that has a little bit more flavor and I cook that, add it to it, it's amazing. They'll eat it. Like sometimes, it requires a little bit of more processed things, but I think it's so fun to ask that question. In fact, one of my favorite meals of all time is called almost rotten vegetable soup. And it's on our website. You can look it up. But
Okay.
my husband coined the term.
Almost rotten vegetable soup. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I know, right? But it's because I open the fridge and it's like, what's about to go bad right now? And I'm going to turn this into a soup. So I just pull out whatever vegetables that are almost ready to go bad. I chop them up, put them in my Instant Pot. There's two things that make it so good. Old Bay seasoning makes it really good with some veggie broth, and then cashew cream. So then at the very end, I'll cream up some cashews with just water in my blender and throw it in there. And it's so good, right? And so it just came out of the creativity of not wanting to waste food and to give my kids as much nutrition as possible. So finding joy in the mundane, I think is a huge skill, especially when it comes to being a mom. Like it's really mundane to
Mhm.
cook. And there's something to me that makes it so fun to try to make something plant-based. It's like, yeah, I could make lasagna, but ooh, how could I make it plant-based? Like that's exciting to me. And that
Yeah.
helps me find joy. But it could be anything like doing the dishes. It's like, how can I make this more fun? I can listen to my favorite podcast. I can, I'm always asking myself, how can I make this more fun? Especially if it's just a really boring, mundane mom job.
Right. But how nice. That just adds a little joie de vivre to life. And I love that being a mom has really opened up and supercharged your creative side. I think that's really lovely. I haven't heard that before. I really like that. All right. So was there ever a moment when you doubted this new path or you felt like imposter syndrome creeping in because you also coach? So how did you push through that? Because I think so many moms, I know so many moms are struggling with that imposter syndrome thing. Am I really good enough to do X? Will people really want to listen to me? The answer is yes.
Yeah, I think it's how I consistently push through because it's not just like a one time when we feel that way. I think anyone who goes on social media, it's every time you open social media. And there's so many times where I'll open social media and I see someone doing something similar or making a recipe and it went viral. And I really, it's like I have the thought of why even try? Like, why try? I'm not as good as this. Why even make, like, am I even making a dent? And, something for me that I love is I see a lot of symbolism in the stars in the sky. It's like we're
Mm.
all kind of trying to be stars out there, especially on social media. And, you look up and it's like, does one star even matter? Does it make that big of a difference? And, for some people it does. And that light could be the only light that some individuals see, that you're the only star that can actually reach that individual. And even if that individual is my own family. And I always look back and think, okay, so if I never make a difference in other people's lives, I know that what I've had to learn, the skills that I've had to gain have transformed me. I know that before all
Mm.
this, when my husband had a stroke and we were going through COVID, I was in my lowest point, and me starting a business saved me. So if the only person this has helped is me to try something out, to gain different skills, to be better, and then in turn, I have a daughter that struggles. She's on the spectrum, and every single time I feel like I learn something from my business, it helps me be a better mom to her. It's some skill that I had to learn for business, but sometimes that's how life works, right? It's like, this is what I want.
Mm.
So I learned this skill, but then in another way, it's helping me to be a better mom. It's helping me to, see things differently because I was forced to go beyond my comfort zone. And so I think regardless, like if you're the only
Yeah.
one that's converted because of what you're trying to preach, then it is worthwhile because your soul is worth so much. It is, great. And so just keeping that in mind, and that you do make a difference, even if your light doesn't shine as much as other people's lights do shine, to just keep going and keep trying. And that sometimes it's just a matter of timing, that sometimes it's the most patient person wins.
Oh, absolutely. I think it doesn't happen overnight, right? Um, you hear of actors who are overnight sensations, but they've been toiling in the background for 20 years. And I think it's the same on social media, right? Necessary evil that we all have to be on.
Oh,
But you said something about pushing past the uncomfortable. I know that's where the creativity really happens and the progress really happens, is when you push yourself, even baby steps, just a little more each and every day. That's where the work is, but that's where the magic happens.
yeah. It's that paced progress over perfection. Am I
Exactly.
a little bit further than I was before? Have I learned a little bit more? Am I a little bit stronger? That paced progress. It really is.
And that's beautiful progress.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So for someone who is, let's call them plant curious, but overwhelmed, what would you advise would be the very first step that they could take?
I think every time you look down at your meal, just think, okay, what could I add to this? It's sometimes so simple. It's like, I could add an apple. And it makes a huge difference. I think sometimes we forget the small and simple things. Even just eating one mushroom a day, one little button mushroom, even if you hate mushrooms, that could significantly decrease your risk of getting cancer. Like something so small. Yeah, one little mushroom. Eating
Wow.
leafy greens, having a serving of leafy greens every day can make your brain 11 years younger. Just adding something. Don't worry about taking anything out. If like, I'm not going to take anything away from you that you love. You can have your cake,
Hmm.
you can have your ice cream, you can have your bacon, whatever. But first, let's put in a little bit more of the nutrients that your body needs that's going to help protect you. So that could just be berries. Like when you look down at your cereal, which I used to just eat cold cereal in the morning. I don't anymore. I'm an oatmeal fan, but at first it was like, okay, I'm just going to add a handful of blueberries. I didn't even like blueberries, but I started doing that and now I absolutely love it. And now it's like, okay, can I add frozen rice cauliflower on top of that? And
That.
right, it's like, what can
Yeah.
I add in to just add in more plants, and it can be as simple as when you're making dinner. It's like, well, I can throw in some oranges. Let me just slice up oranges for our dinner on top of everything I'm
Hmm.
making.
Hmm.
Adding in is key.
It's easy to do. Just again, taking little food chances. The worst that can happen is you're like, okay, I didn't like that combo. And then you move on. So we all know as moms that life with kids is a total balancing act. Are there any non negotiables or rituals that keep you grounded,
Mhm.
being both a mom and an entrepreneur?
100%. I early on and always have. You probably have heard this example of, you can take like a glass, and if you were to put rocks and sand and pebbles and water into that glass, you probably couldn't fit it all unless you put it in the right order. You put in the big rocks in first, then you put in the pebbles, then you put in the sand, then you put in the water. And it all
Mhm.
fits. It all works. And so that's how it is. That's how I structure my day. When I sit down to journal about all the things I need today, I'm like, number one, where am I with God? Did I spend time to pray? Did I meditate? Did I read my scriptures? Number two, where am I with my own health? And I think that's key. A lot of moms put their family number two, but you have to be number two. It's like there's God and then it's you, and then it's everyone else. So did I get enough sleep? Did I work out? Did I exercise? Am I feeding myself healthy, nutritious foods? And then
Right.
number three. Now, sometimes my family is number three, and sometimes they're going to interrupt number two, or even
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
and sometimes that has
Yeah.
to happen. Like you have a newborn and
Yeah.
sleep's not going to happen. Sometimes there's an event that, I would have loved to have worked out, but I have to be there at my kid's school. But overall, the bigger picture, am I putting number one and number two, number one, number two, and then number three is
Yeah.
my husband and my family. And then number four is my work. And I always outline, and I think as a mom, I understand, my husband, he gets to go to work and he doesn't have to think about it, but I'm the primary caregiver when it comes to my children, and knowing that. So I don't get bitter at my husband when my daughter throws up at school because they fed her milk and she's allergic to dairy. And I'm the one that has to drop everything and go pick her up. And it's like, I know that's my role. I'm
That's our job.
right.
Yeah.
That's my role. And I'm happy to be there. And it's funny because while I'm working, I'm home. And my daughter was saying, Mom, when I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to be a stay-at-home mom. And I was like, do you view me as a stay-at-home
Mhm.
mom? And she's like, yeah. And I love that even though I am working, I'm home and I'm here. And she sees me as being there for her. And I love that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you think in the past it was like, you work or you don't, you're either there for your kids or you're not. And there is a beautiful middle ground. And making sure that your priorities are in check makes it all possible. You can do it
Right.
all if it's done at the right time, in the right timing.
Very wise advice. Thank you for that. And that might actually feed into the next question I want to ask you, which is if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice before all of this began, before PlantWhys began, before everything began, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm a big napper. I love taking naps. Like, I feel like it's just like you have to get through life during every phase of my life. When I was in school, I'd come home from school and take a nap, and then I felt like I could do my homework. When I was a young mom, I'd nap with my baby, and I would just say, it's okay, keep napping, keep putting like rest is okay, because then if you take the rest, then you're strong enough to be able to keep going, and that you are stronger than you think you are, but also to prioritize that rest, and
Mhm.
and to prioritize your own health and prioritize God, and then you'll be able to do everything. But you have to take time to rest. It's okay. It's okay to
Yeah.
rest.
We have to rest because as moms, we all know that there is a significant lack of rest. So that is, and you're right, that afternoon nap when you can sneak it in is it's so fabulous. It's really so nice. So I know you do coaching, and I'm curious, does one person stand out as like, wow, look what they have been able to do
Mhm.
with the advice that I gave them and me working with them? One person that just sort of blew your mind.
Yeah, it's funny. Usually I work with women. And I do work mostly with women. Sometimes the women want
Mhm.
me to change their husband. And I always say, change yourself.
Can't do that.
I know, right? I'm always like, change yourself first. But this particular couple, they worked on it together. It was beautiful. And his name was Carrie, and it was the beginning of my journey, actually. And he had diabetes, and he was at the point where he was on dialysis, and it was just really not looking good. He'd always eaten exactly what the doctor had said to eat, right, which was the typical low carb diet. But then one doctor finally said, this hasn't been working for you, maybe you should try plant-based eating. And they'd recommended the book Mastering Diabetes, and they'd read it.
Mhm.
And that book is fantastic because it shows you that you actually can heal, and can improve your health when you are prioritizing plants, and that you can eat starch when you have diabetes. In fact, it's one of the best ways that you can address the underlying symptoms of diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, and not just the cause. Or sorry, not just the, sorry. You can address the underlying cause and not just the symptom. And
Mhm.
so we worked on a plant-based diet. He ended up losing 32 pounds in 3 months. He got off almost all of his blood pressure medication. I mean, his health improved significantly, and his wife lost 10 pounds right along with her. And he was just so supportive. And on our last call, he was just so grateful. And I was in tears and I hung up the call. My husband walked in. He's like, "Why are you crying?" And I was like, "Because it hit me that I couldn't save my dad. My dad died of a heart attack. He's 55 years old. And Carrie reminded me so much of my dad. He would just be like, "Ali, you're so awesome." I mean, he would say things to me just like my dad would say to me. And while I couldn't save him, I could help Carrie. And it was just this realization of how when we go through something traumatic, one of the most healing things to help us over time is to be
Mhm.
able to help someone who's going through something similar, or to,
Mhm.
prevent something that you've been through, that it's through serving others that we heal our own trauma. And so I
Mhm.
think it was just so powerful. I would never wish anyone to have to go through what I've gone through, whether it was my dad's heart attack and death or it was my husband's stroke. But it's through those that I've been able to help other people who are going through something similar. And it's just the deepest,
Yeah.
most beautiful joy that you can experience.
Yeah. I think that's so beautiful, Ali. Thank you for that. And also, what a fabulous way and beautiful way and empowering way to pay it forward in your own unique style. So I love that. Thank you. Thank you. So I have a fun question for you. What is your favorite go-to plant-based comfort food?
Ooh, ah, dates with a little bit of peanut butter and then
Hmm.
some chocolate chips on top. I love myself
Yum.
chocolate. But I used
Yeah.
to make like energy bites all the time, but sometimes I just don't even have the energy to do that. And
You don't have the energy to make energy
I
bites. Okay.
oh, I want something sweet. It hits the sweet tooth like nothing else, and it feels good in my body, right? So dates with a little bit, just tiny little bit of peanut butter, and then chocolate chips on top. It's like a cookie. It's so good.
Ooh, all right. I'm gonna have to try that. Have you seen the date sweetened chocolate chips? I
Oh
don't even know the brand. They come in a purple package, and
no!
yeah, date sweetened chocolate
All
chips.
right, I'll check.
Oh, Ali, so interesting and so inspiring and empowering. Unfortunately, our time is drawing to a close, and I have a question that I ask all of my amazing moms that I have the privilege of interviewing. Since this is the Mom to More podcast, Ali Essig, what is your more?
I think my more is understanding that through motherhood and through learning from motherhood and through all this is just the personal growth that can come if you choose to accept the more. I look at some of my friends who are amazing and do amazing things, but they spend 80% of their day in entertainment and maybe 20% in service or personal development. And I found
Mhm.
that my happiness really comes when I flip that, when I'm spending 80% of the time really trying to help someone else, or 80% of the time trying to strengthen my own self, because I think personal development is just as important as
Oh, yeah.
serving and helping others, and still letting myself have that 20%. You don't want to go all in at 100%. But sometimes it feels like when you're a mom, you don't have time to, you're always like serving and serving. And so we tend to just scroll and scroll because you only have 5 minutes here or 5 minutes there. But maybe in those 5 minutes of time, picking up a book, learning something, it just fills your soul so
Mhm.
much more than scrolling. If you could just, and then spend 20% maybe at the end of the day enjoying a movie with your kid, you'll feel so much more satisfied if you're choosing more instead of just social media, that really take
Yeah, absolutely. I try to stay as far away from that as possible whenever possible. So, Ali, please share where our listeners can find you online. And folks, everything is going to be in the show notes.
All right, you can find me on YouTube. So that's my main platform is YouTube, and that's PlantWhys, PlantWhys, because I like to teach the why behind eating more plants. On YouTube, I show tons of recipes, vegan recipes, even though I'm not completely vegan, but that's where you can learn how you can easily add more plants and make it easy, delicious, simple, using just the ingredients you have in your own pantry. So it doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can also follow me on Instagram, PlantWhys, same thing, PlantWhys. And inside my membership, not only do I teach people how to eat more plants, but I also have a ton of Pilates classes that are really helpful to help strengthen your core and pelvic floor, especially as you get older. If you find yourself peeing a little bit when you laugh, jump, sneeze, or cough, I have a lot
Been
of
there.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of those classes that just 5 minutes a day for 30 days that you can get the benefits of strengthening your core and pelvic floor. And for all of your listeners, I have a free 30-day trial to our membership, so that even if you just want to go in, try it out, see if you can use some of those 5 minutes a day Pilates classes or getting more recipes for eating more plants, understanding kind of the PlantWhys plate, how you make sure you're getting enough fiber and protein so that you're doing it in a way that feels really good in your body. So check out that free 30-day trial as well.
Terrific. Ali, thank you so much. And I'm so glad we connected. This has been such a wonderful episode and so much information. And I just want to thank you for everything you're doing to help women just feel better, live a more vibrant life, because it's so important. And that's really what we're all here to do, is to help one another. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to read another 5-star review. And this one is from Nancy Travis. And Nancy wrote, Sharon is an insightful and fun podcast host. We dove deep on what it means to play many roles as a woman and discovered that the possibilities are endless. It was like sharing a morning coffee with a friend. Well, thanks, Nancy. And please keep leaving those 5-star reviews, and I'll keep reading them. Before I sign off, a quick favor. Following the Mom to More pod means you'll never miss an episode, and it really helps the show to grow. And if you'd be willing to leave a 5-star rating and review and share an episode with another mom, I'd be super grateful and appreciate your support.